Imagine being a world leader with access to presidential palaces, military protection, and diplomatic immunity. Now imagine using all of that power, not to serve your people, but to run one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations on the planet. While his citizens starved in the streets, one dictator was living like a cartel kingpin, making billions by turning his entire country into a narco state highway for Colombian cocaine headed straight to American streets. On January 4th, 2025, the world watched as U.S. Special Forces launched a coordinated military strike on Venezuela, capturing President Nicolas Maduro in a dramatic nighttime raid. But this was not just about removing a dictator. The U.S. Department of Justice had been building a case for years. Prosecutors say he was the head of the Cartel of the Suns, a narco-trafficking conspiracy that made him billions while destroying his nation. The allegations are staggering: coordination with FARC guerrillas, protection of cocaine shipments worth billions, partnerships with Mexican cartels, and the systematic use of Venezuela's military and government to facilitate drug trafficking into the United States. This is the story of how a bus driver became a president, and how that president became one of the world's most wanted narco-terrorists. Stay until the end, because we are going to break down exactly how Maduro built his narco empire, the lavish lifestyle he lived while his people suffered, how he operated like a cartel boss from the presidential palace, and the evidence that finally brought U.S. Special Forces to his door. This is the inside story of Maduro's narco lifestyle. Before we dive into the billions and the cartel connections, you need to understand how Nicolas Maduro went from driving buses in Caracas to running what U.S. prosecutors call a narco-terrorist organization from the presidential palace. Maduro wasn't born into power. He started as a bus driver, working the streets of Venezuela's capital. He had ambition, and he aligned himself with the right person at the right time. Hugo Chavez, the socialist revolutionary who would transform Venezuela. Maduro rose through the ranks, becoming Chavez's vice president and most trusted ally. When Chavez died in 2013, Maduro inherited more than just the presidency. He inherited control of a country sitting on the world's largest oil reserves. He inherited a socialist revolution that had nationalized industries and kicked out American oil companies like ExxonMobil. According to U.S. prosecutors, he inherited something else: a network of military officials, traffickers, and guerrilla groups that had been using Venezuela as a cocaine superhighway for years. The perfect storm for a narco state. Here's what made Venezuela the perfect place for a narco operation: geography, corruption, and chaos. Venezuela shares a massive border with Colombia, the world's largest cocaine producer. For decades, Colombian guerrilla groups like FARC controlled coca-growing regions and cocaine production. They needed a way to move that product north toward Central America, Mexico, and eventually the United States. Venezuela became that highway. And under Maduro's rule, according to U.S. prosecutors, it wasn't just a highway. It was a protected, government-sanctioned trafficking route where cocaine moved freely under military protection. The chaos in Venezuela made it even easier. As the economy collapsed under Maduro's rule, as hyperinflation destroyed the currency, as food and medicine shortages left citizens desperate, the government and military became increasingly corrupt. When you can't pay your soldiers, when the economy is in free fall, drug money becomes very attractive. This is where Nicolas Maduro's alleged double life begins. On the surface, Nicolas Maduro was a world leader. He gave speeches about socialism and revolution. He met with other heads of state. He lived in the presidential palace. But according to U.S. prosecutors and intelligence gathered over years of investigation, behind that presidential facade was a man living a narco lifestyle that would make cartel bosses jealous. While 8 million Venezuelans fled the country to escape poverty, while citizens waited in lines for basic food and medicine, while hyperinflation made their money worthless, Maduro was allegedly making billions from cocaine trafficking. Remember the viral video of Maduro eating an expensive steak dinner prepared by celebrity chef Salt Bae in a luxury restaurant? While his people starved, he was living large. That was not just tone-deaf leadership. According to the allegations, that was narco money funding a narco lifestyle. Here's what separates Maduro from typical corrupt politicians. The U.S. alleges he did not just take bribes or look the other way. They claim he actively ran the operation like a cartel boss, using his position as president to coordinate, protect, and profit from massive cocaine trafficking. The U.S. Department of Justice called it the Cartel of the Suns, named after the sun insignias worn by high-ranking Venezuelan military officials. According to the indictment, this was not a few corrupt officials. This was a systematic, government-run narco-trafficking conspiracy that went all the way to the top. Think about how cartels operate. They control territory, they have military-style enforcement, they coordinate with other trafficking organizations, they use violence and intimidation, and they make billions moving product. Now imagine having an entire country's military, police, and government infrastructure to do all of that legally, under the cover of state authority. That is what prosecutors allege Maduro created. According to the U.S. indictment, here is how the operation worked. Maduro and his inner circle, including high-ranking military officials, government ministers, and trusted allies, coordinated with FARC guerrillas in Colombia who controlled cocaine production. These were not just business relationships. The U.S. alleges these were deep partnerships where Venezuelan officials provided protection, logistics, and safe passage. Cocaine produced in Colombia would be moved across the border into Venezuela. Once in Venezuelan territory, it was protected. Venezuelan military officials, allegedly working under Maduro's narco network, would ensure the cocaine moved safely through the country. Venezuela became a transit hub, a safe zone where traffickers could move product without fear of law enforcement because law enforcement was part of the operation. The cocaine would then be handed off to international trafficking networks, including Mexican cartels like factions tied to the Sinaloa organization, who would move it through Central America and Mexico into the United States. Every step of that journey allegedly involved Maduro's network, and every step generated billions in profits. The lifestyle of billions. When you are making billions from cocaine trafficking, you live differently. And despite Venezuela's economic collapse, Maduro and his inner circle lived in luxury. While the average Venezuelan struggled to afford food, Maduro's government officials were seen with expensive cars, luxury watches, and international travel. The presidential palace remained well-stocked and well-maintained even as hospitals ran out of basic supplies. This is classic cartel behavior. Live large while the territory you control suffers. Mexican cartel leaders do it. Colombian cartel bosses did it. And according to the allegations, Maduro did it from the presidential palace. But here is what made Maduro's operation even more sophisticated than traditional cartels. He had diplomatic immunity, international recognition as a head of state, and the ability to use government resources openly. He could meet with other world leaders while allegedly running a narco empire. He could use military aircraft and naval vessels for trafficking operations under the guise of official government business. He had the ultimate cover. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice dropped a bombshell. They indicted Nicolas Maduro on narco-terrorism charges. This was not a minor accusation. This was the United States formally charging a sitting head of state with being a narco-terrorist. The indictment laid out a conspiracy that allegedly spanned years and involved armed groups and cartel coordination. The U.S. alleged that Maduro's network coordinated directly with FARC, the Colombian guerrilla group heavily involved in cocaine production. FARC was not just a political organization. They controlled coca-growing regions and ran cocaine production operations worth billions. According to prosecutors, Maduro's government provided FARC with protection, safe haven in Venezuelan territory, and logistical support. In exchange, FARC cocaine moved through Venezuela with government protection. The indictment also alleged coordination with Venezuelan military and political officials who were part of the Cartel of the Suns. These were not rogue actors. These were high-ranking officials allegedly working under Maduro's direction. And critically, the U.S. alleged that this network connected to international trafficking organizations, including Mexican cartels. The Sinaloa cartel and other Mexican trafficking organizations were downstream partners, receiving cocaine that had been protected and facilitated through Venezuela. Venezuela as a protected transit hub. This is where the allegations get specific. Prosecutors claimed that cocaine produced in Colombia by FARC and other groups was moved into Venezuelan territory. Once inside Venezuela, it was protected by military and government officials. The cocaine was stored, repackaged, and prepared for onward trafficking. It was then handed off to trafficking organizations, including Mexican cartels, who moved it through Central America and Mexico into the United States. The United States' argument was not that Maduro was running street-level cartel operations. It was that he was facilitating and protecting a massive trafficking pipeline that moved billions of dollars worth of cocaine toward American streets. Think about what that means. Every kilo of cocaine that moved through Venezuela under this alleged protection contributed to the drug crisis in the United States. Every shipment that made it through generated profits that went back to Maduro's network. 3. The $50 million bounty. The U.S. did not just indict Maduro, they put a $50 million bounty on his head. That is one of the highest bounties ever offered by the U.S. government. It is the kind of bounty placed on the world's most dangerous terrorists and cartel leaders. That bounty sent a message. The United States considered Maduro not just a corrupt politician, but an active threat to American national security because of his alleged role in drug trafficking. The evidence trail. According to reports and the indictment, the evidence included intercepted communications between Venezuelan officials and traffickers, testimony from cooperating witnesses, including former Venezuelan officials and traffickers, financial records showing suspicious transactions and wealth accumulation, intelligence from DEA operations tracking cocaine shipments through Venezuela, satellite imagery and surveillance of trafficking operations. This was not a case built on rumors. The U.S. spent years gathering evidence, building the case, and preparing for the moment they could act. After the 2020 indictment, the pressure on Maduro intensified. The United States imposed sanctions, froze assets, and made it clear they wanted him in custody. But capturing a sitting head of state who is protected by a military and security apparatus is nearly impossible. So the United States played the long game. They continued gathering intelligence. They tracked his movements, his security patterns, and his inner circle. They also built up military assets in the region. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, the United States increased its military presence in the Caribbean. Officially, they said it was about combating drug smuggling, but few believed that was the only reason. The buildup was massive, including naval vessels, aircraft, and special operations forces. In July 2024, Venezuela held elections. Maduro claimed victory, but opposition leader Maria Corina Machado and her candidate Edmundo Gonzalez said they had won based on voting tallies. International observers questioned the results. The U.S. and other countries refused to recognize Maduro's victory. This gave the U.S. additional justification. Not only was Maduro an indicted narco-terrorist, he was now an illegitimate leader, clinging to power through fraud. The opposition published an open letter saying the hour of freedom had come. They said they were ready to return and assume power. But Maduro's security forces cracked down hard on any protests. The situation was tense, but Maduro seemed secure in his palace, protected by loyal military units. The raid, January 4th, 2025. Raid, then came the night that changed everything. Night. In the early hours of January 4th, 2025, residents of Caracas were woken by explosions. At first, some thought it was an earthquake, but it quickly became clear Venezuela was under attack. U.S. forces launched coordinated strikes on military installations across Venezuela. These were not random targets. They were carefully selected bases that housed Maduro's most loyal units and the military infrastructure that protected him. The strikes were cover for the real operation, a special forces raid to capture Maduro himself. According to reports, U.S. Special Forces infiltrated Caracas, located Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, and extracted them in a dramatic nighttime operation. The precision was remarkable. They got in, grabbed the targets, and got out without sustaining casualties. How did they do it? Without significant resistance? Intelligence suggests there may have been internal cooperation. Some Venezuelan military officials may have been turned, providing intelligence and access. When you are facing a $50 million bounty and the full weight of U.S. military power, loyalty becomes negotiable. The journey to New York. Journey. The photos and videos that followed were extraordinary. Maduro, who just hours before had been a sitting president, was now in U.S. custody aboard the USS Iowa, a naval vessel in the Caribbean. He was flown to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, the infamous U.S. naval base used for high-value detainees. From there, he was transferred to a plane and flown to Stewart Air Force Base in New York. Guantanamo. The final destination was the DEA headquarters in Manhattan, where he would face federal charges. The White House posted a video showing Maduro entering the DEA building with the caption, "Perp walked," the public display of an alleged criminal by law enforcement. Maduro spent his first night in U.S. custody at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the notorious facility that has housed high-profile defendants like R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Sean Diddy Combs. From presidential palace to federal detention in less than 24 hours, the fall was complete. A narco state exposed. The capture of Nicolas Maduro exposed what many had suspected for years. Venezuela under his rule had become a narco state, where the government itself was allegedly the trafficking organization. This was not about a few corrupt officials taking bribes. According to U.S. prosecutors, this was systematic, government-run drug trafficking that used state resources, military protection, and diplomatic cover to move billions of dollars worth of cocaine. Maduro lived like a cartel king because, according to the allegations, he was one. He had a presidential title and international recognition that traditional cartel bosses could never achieve. The human cost. While Maduro allegedly made billions, 8 million Venezuelans fled the country. Those who remained faced hyperinflation, food shortages, medicine shortages, and a collapsed economy. The oil wealth that should have benefited the nation was squandered while narco profits allegedly enriched Maduro and his inner circle. This is the true cost of a narco lifestyle at the presidential level. An entire nation destroyed while the leader lives in luxury. What happens next? Maduro faces federal charges in New York on narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and weapons charges. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in U.S. federal prison. But the bigger question is what happens to Venezuela? President Trump announced that the United States would run the country during a transition period. The opposition, led by Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez, wants to assume power based on the 2024 election they claim to have won. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, a Maduro loyalist, was named interim president by Venezuela's Supreme Court. But with Maduro in U.S. custody and the military potentially fracturing, her hold on power is uncertain. The streets of Caracas remain tense. People are staying home, uncertain what comes next. Will there be more strikes? Will the military split? Will the opposition return? Nobody knows. The message to other leaders: the capture of Maduro sends a clear message. If you are a world leader involved in drug trafficking that affects the United States, your title will not protect you forever. The United States spent years building the case, gathering evidence, and waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, they acted decisively. For other leaders who might be tempted to use their positions for narco trafficking, Maduro's journey from presidential palace to federal detention is a warning. When you look at the whole picture, Nicolas Maduro's story is about the ultimate corruption of power. He had the opportunity to lead a nation with the world's largest oil reserves. He could have used that position to improve lives, build infrastructure, and create prosperity. Instead, according to U.S. prosecutors, he chose to run his country like a cartel operation, facilitating billions of dollars in cocaine trafficking while his people suffered. He lived a double life: world leader by day, narco facilitator by night. He operated like a cartel boss with the cover of presidential authority. The evidence gathered over years of investigation led to one of the most dramatic military operations in recent history: the capture of a sitting head of state on narco-terrorism charges. Maduro's narco lifestyle is over. The presidential palace is empty. The protection is gone. Now he faces American justice in a federal courtroom, charged with crimes that could keep him in prison for life. This is what happens when a dictator chooses cartels over citizens, when power becomes a tool for trafficking rather than governance, when billions in narco profits matter more than the millions of people suffering under your rule. The cartel of the suns has set, and Maduro's fall from power is complete. What do you think about Maduro's alleged narco empire? Should world leaders face the same justice as cartel bosses when they are accused of drug trafficking? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want to see more stories about the intersection of power, corruption, and cartels, hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning of uncovering how deep the narco world really goes.